The desert had a way of swallowing sound, burying secrets in red dust and sagebrush. As the evening sun bled across the mesas, the only movement on the horizon was the slow gait of a black horse with a gash above its flank, limping toward a small ranch nestled in a quiet bend of the canyon. Lila spotted him first, her fingers tightening around the worn rails of the fence, eyes narrowing against the glare. She slipped through the gate barefoot, skirts brushing sand, and reached for the horse's reins with a whisper that calmed most beasts. He flinched at first, nostrils flaring, eyes wild, but something in her voice, steady, low, like the river she used to sleep beside, eased the animal's trembling. She pressed her palm to his neck and whispered again, this time to herself, "What happened to you, Samson?" From the porch, Harper watched. His silhouette barely moved, a tall, wiry figure leaning on a cane carved from cedar. He never called out, didn't ask questions, just waited as Lila coaxed the horse toward the barn. A crimson trail followed them in the dust. Once they were inside, she lit a lantern and cleaned the wound. The old man stepped through the doorway only when she had finished binding it. "That ain't a coyote bite," he said. Lila didn't look up. "No. A knife, maybe. Or broken glass." Harper stared at the cut. "You think he was run off?" "I think someone wanted him gone. Not dead. Gone." There was a long silence, filled only by Samson's labored breathing. Then Harper turned and walked out. Lila had arrived at Kindred Hollow Ranch 5 years earlier, rail-thin and sunburned, barefoot with a ragged shawl wrapped around her shoulders. The war had ended, but not for everyone. Her chains had been melted down for bullets, but the ghosts clung to her skin like soot. Harper hadn't asked her name. He simply pointed to a small cabin behind the barn and said, "It's yours if you work." She never stopped working after that. He was a strange man, Harper. Quiet as driftwood. People in the nearby town whispered about him. Said he once rode with rangers. Said he'd hunted men across the Badlands and turned in his badge after one job went too far. But no one dared knock on his door. That night, Lila lay awake in the loft above the barn. The sky was painted in bruised purples, the wind thin and sharp. Below, Samson shifted in his stall. Something was coming. She didn't know how she knew, but she'd learned to trust that feeling, the same one that had saved her life when the shackles came off and the hounds were loosed. She sat up. Down at the house, Harper hadn't lit a lamp. He sat by the window with a rifle across his lap and his cane leaning against the wall. His right knee ached, the kind of ache that knew more than weather. It knew memory. The dogs barked once, then fell silent. A minute later, hooves pounded in the distance. Dust rose on the ridge. A flame ignited in the darkness. A torch, then 2, then 5. Harper didn't move. They came like thunder. 6 riders, one with a scar across his nose, another with a belt of ears looped at his waist. They reeked of whiskey and blood. The one in front, Reyes, wore a Confederate officer's coat, buttoned halfway, with a silver tooth glinting when he grinned. "Evening," he called out. "Fine piece of land. Real peaceful. You the owner?" Harper stood on the porch. "I am. You the one called Harper?" A pause. "Depends who's a skinned." Reyes laughed. "I'm a skin. Red Fawn Gang. Maybe you've heard of us." Harper didn't blink. "You're the ones who torched Cochise crossing last week. Left the preacher hanging over the church doors." "That's us," said Reyes, grinning wider. "Now we're just looking for a place to rest. And maybe take that fine stallion I saw limping in earlier. He's got spirit." Harper stepped down from the porch. "That horse isn't yours." Reyes raised a hand. The other men dismounted. One of them spat in the dirt. Another pulled out a knife and began cleaning under his nails. Lila watched from the loft's cracks, her breath caught in her throat. Reyes took a step forward. "We take what we want. Out here, there ain't no law. Only who's left standing. So I'll say it again, move, old man." Harper didn't move, didn't flinch. "You're not Taquin the horse." Reyes nodded. "All right." The man with the belt of ears lunged. Harper's cane cracked across his face. The outlaw crumpled with a grunt, blood spurting from his nose. Gunfire followed, one shot, a warning, fired into the sky by Reyes. "That was your one," he said. Next one goes in your gut. Lila had grabbed the shotgun from the wall. She was shaking but held it firm. Leave him be. The gang laughed. She talks, one of them said. Reyes raised an eyebrow. Girl, I like the fire in you. Maybe we'll take more than the horse tonight. Harper looked at her once, just once, and shook his head, almost imperceptibly. She lowered the barrel, but her eyes stayed locked on Reyes. They took Samson, tied him behind one of their horses, and rode out, fire trailing behind them as they tossed torches onto the barn roof. Flames caught fast, but they hadn't counted on the irrigation trench that Lila had dug months ago. She dragged the canvas tarp over the flames, while Harper heaved buckets from the well. They saved the barn, but not the silence. Hours later, Harper knelt beside the floorboards of his house and pried open a wooden hatch. Dust poured out as he pulled free a long bundle wrapped in oilcloth. Lila stood in the doorway, a blanket around her shoulders. He unwrapped the bundle. A Colt Navy revolver, polished and oiled. A badge, dull but legible, U.S. Marshal. A black coat stiff with age. I thought you said you were done fighting, she said softly. I was, Harper replied. He strapped on the gun belt. You're not going alone. He looked up at her. It's not your fight. It is now. That horse saved me once, she said. And so did you. They stood there in the dim candlelight, two shadows against the rising dawn. Neither said anything more. But in the stillness, the desert held its breath. Outlaws had taken something they didn't understand, and now something was coming for them. The morning rose hard and colorless over the desert. The wind carried the scent of scorched timber and old iron, a bitter reminder of the night before. Harper stood at the edge of the yard, saddling a paint mare with a war-worn saddle and his black coat draped over the pommel. Lila came out carrying a satchel of dried beans, jerky, and a box of cartridges. She slung it over the second saddle, the one she'd pulled from the rafters, the one that hadn't been used in years. You're not staying behind, Harper said, not quite asking. No, she answered. I've tracked men before. These ones don't scare me. Harper gave her a long look, then nodded once. We ride light. Fast. We'll catch them on the open range before they reach a place to dig in. The horses kicked up dust as they cut through the canyon, the early light stretching their shadows long across the broken ground. Lila rode with her back straight, the old shotgun strapped to her saddle, a hat pulled low over her face. Harper didn't talk much on the trail, but she didn't expect him to. He rode like a man who'd done it too long, each movement spare and exact, his eyes flicking to signs she barely noticed, hoof prints, disturbed sage, the bent heads of grass. By noon they found the first clue. A broken horseshoe in the dust, crusted with blood. Harper dismounted and crouched beside it, brushing away the dirt. Samson, he murmured. How do you know? Bucked this shoe loose a month ago. I had it reset with a square nail pattern. These marks match. Lila knelt beside him. So we're close. Not yet, but they ain't riding hard. They think no one's following. They pressed on. By dusk, the trail led them through dry hills and into a box canyon where a windmill creaked mournfully above an abandoned homestead. Harper slowed his mare, eyes scanning the ridge. They camped here, he said. Smell that. Lila sniffed. Ashen fat. Burned meat. Something else beneath it, coppery and sharp. They found the remains of a fire pit and the stripped carcass of a mule. Flies buzzed over a heap of cloves near the wagon. Lila tugged a tarp aside and stepped back. A man lay underneath, face beaten to pulp, eyes wide and clouded. His shirt was stitched with a sheriff's star. His badge had been nailed to the wheel of the wagon like a warning. She swallowed hard. They killed lawmen. They kill anyone they want, Harper said. Been doing it for years. He lifted the badge gently and wrapped it in a cloth before slipping it into his coat pocket. This one had family somewhere. He deserves to go home. They didn't sleep that night, just dozed in shifts with rifles in hand. Coyotes howled nearby, but nothing came close. At dawn, Harper checked the tracks and nodded. Still fresh. We gainin'. The desert changed as they rode south, low shrubs giving way to dry creeks and rocky escarpments. Lila saw her first cougar from a distance, lounging on a ledge with a tail twitching like a fuse. They stopped in a ragged town called Oriole, little more than a saloon, a blacksmith shed, and a church with a broken bell. The streets were silent except for the wheeze of wind through shutters. Harper rode straight to the smithy. An old man with soot on his face stepped out, wiping his hands on a filthy rag. "Don't get many strangers," he said. "We're looking for a gang road through here." Harper said. 6 men, one with a silver tooth. The blacksmith's eyes narrowed. "They came through 2 nights ago. Bought supplies, took my daughter's mule. Didn't pay." "Which way?" "They said they were headed for Devil's Acre." Harper looked to Lila. Her jaw clenched. "We'll pay for the mule," she said. The old man waved her off. "Just shoot the bastards. That'll square us." Back on the trail, Harper explained. "Devil's Acre used to be a mining town. Silver. Law don't touch it no more. Too many bodies under the dirt. And they're going there why? Refuge. They've got friends there. And worse." They rode harder after that, the horses beginning to show wear. At dusk, they stopped at a canyon spring to rest. Lila stripped off her boots and soaked her feet in the cold water. Harper sat nearby, cleaning his revolver. "I didn't know you used to be a marshal," she said. He didn't look up. "A long time ago. Before I knew better." "What happened?" "I brought in a man once. A runaway. Said he'd stolen horses. But it wasn't true. He'd taken his wife and kids and tried to run north. He begged me not to turn him in." Harper paused. "I did anyway. Found out later they hung him. Then burned his family's cabin." Lila said nothing. The air between them tightened like drawn wire. "I ain't asking forgiveness," Harper added. "Just trying to fix a piece of it." She nodded, her voice quiet. "My mother ran too. She didn't make it. I did. They broke camp before sunrise. In the scrublands 2 days out from Devil's Acre, they spotted smoke rising. A small shack stood off the trail." Harper raised a hand to stop, eyes narrowing. "Something's wrong." They dismounted and crept forward. The door to the shack hung ajar, swinging with the wind. Inside, blood pooled across the floorboards. Furniture was smashed. Lila found a cooking pot still warm, the fire underneath, just dying out. Harper scanned the area. "Wait here." Before she could respond, a figure burst from behind the shack, lunging toward her with a knife. She ducked, grabbing the shotgun from her sling and firing from the hip. The man spun and hit the dirt with a grunt. Blood soaked his shirt. Harper ran to her side, but she already stood over the body, panting, jaw tight. The man was young, his face marked with crude tattoos, a snake curling over his cheekbone. "He's one of them," she said. "I recognize the ink." Harper knelt, gripping the outlaw's collar. "Where's Reyes?" The man coughed blood. "Gone south. Left me behind. Said I was too slow." "Why were they going to Devil's Acre?" The man chuckled, teeth red. "You think they want shelter? They want you. The horse was bait. Reyes said you'd follow." Harper's face hardened. "Why?" The outlaw's grin widened. "Because you're the one who put a bullet in his brother's spine. He never forgot. Now he wants you watching her die." The man convulsed once and stilled. Harper stood slowly. Lila wiped her hands clean on her coat. "He knows who you are." "He does." She stared at him. "That badge you kept. How many more did you lose before you stopped wearing it?" "Too many." The wind picked up, rattling the dead man's blade against the ground. Far off in the south, a hawk circled over the cliffs of Devil's Acre. Lila mounted her horse again. "Then we finish this." Harper looked up at her. This girl who'd once arrived at his door with scars on her back and fire in her eyes. Now she rode like vengeance itself, her face hard as canyon stone. "We ride fast," he said. "And we don't stop," she answered. They turned south, the path narrowing, shadows lengthening. The ground ahead was rough, full of blood and silence. But they weren't hunting anymore. They were coming. Dust settled over Devil's Acre like a curse. The old mining town squatted beneath cliffs of red stone, its buildings gray and rotted, like bones picked clean. Wind dragged broken signs across wooden porches, and the single main road ran straight and crooked at once, ending in an old assay office with shattered windows and a door that hung like a drunk. Harper and Lila stood on a bluff above the town as dusk crawled in behind them. The horses breathed hard, sweat slicking their flanks. Below, no movement, no fires, no laughter or shouts or gunfire, just the eerie quiet of a town waiting for something to bleed. "He's down there," Lila said, eyes narrowed. "I can feel it." Harper didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped the butt of his revolver, slow and steady. "They want us to come. Let's not keep them waiting." They left the horses tied behind a rock outcrop and crept down the ridge, boots silent on loose gravel. Harper led them through back alleys, where the planks had warped into sharp angles, each building a leaning shadow of its old self. He counted 6 vantage points, old sniper spots from when outlaws ruled the town. He pointed each one out with a silent motion of his hand. Lila nodded, reading him like the pages of an old book. The trap came early. A burst of gunfire shattered the quiet. Bullets snapped through the air, peppering the ground inches from their boots. Harper yanked Lila behind the blacksmith shop as splinters flew. "They've got eyes on the church," he muttered. "Bell tower's manned. I'll take the side path. Get close under cover. Shotgun's good at 10 yards. Harper didn't like it, but he nodded. "Don't miss." She peeled off into the dusk, melting into broken alleys and collapsing fences. Harper circled right, ducking beneath a wagon and sprinting low to the butcher's shed. He caught a glimpse of the shooter, a man with a wide-brim hat and a scar like a river down his cheek, crouched in the tower, scanning for movement. A soft thud rang out from the left. Then another. Then silence. Harper rose and stepped into the open. A body hung half out the tower window, arms limp. Lila emerged from a shadow beside the jailhouse, cheeks streaked with dirt, shotgun slack in her hands. "One down," she said. They advanced together, clearing the buildings one by one. The saloon reeked of old rot, and whiskey long turned to vinegar. Upstairs, they found another man, passed out drunk with a rifle across his lap. Lila took the weapon and dropped the shells in the spittoon. "That's 2. They're scattering now," Harper said. "Reyes'll be in the mine. That's where he'd feel strongest." She raised a brow. "What makes you so sure?" "Because it's where I'd be." The entrance to the mine lay behind the town, hidden by a leaning stable and half a dozen slag heaps. The path to it was narrow, one way in, no clean exit. The moment they stepped into its shadow, Harper knew they were walking into fire. "We draw them out," he said. "Flush 'em into open ground." "How?" Harper drew a small flask from his coat. "Turpentine. They used to use it to treat the beams. Still burns good." He lit a cloth, waited for it to catch, then tossed it into a side shaft. Fire roared instantly, catching dry timber like paper. Smoke rolled down the tunnels. Screams echoed seconds later, then gunfire. 3 men burst out of the main entrance, coughing and half-blind. Harper took the first in the chest, with a clean shot. Lila leveled the second at the waist. The third turned and tried to run, but Harper was faster. 1 round to the spine. The mine groaned behind them, smoke thick and black. No more men came. Just the silence again, this time more brittle. "He's still inside," Harper said. "He'll wait." Lila hesitated. "So do we go in?" "No," Harper said, voice flat. "He wants that. He wants dark and traps. We force him out." He picked up one of the rifles from the fallen men and walked to the mine's mouth. "Reyes," he shouted, "you owe me a reckoning. Come out and settle it." A pause. Then a laugh echoed from the dark. Harsh. Familiar. "I've waited years for this, Harper," the voice called. "You finally come crawl back to die with your guilt. You took the girl. Took the law. Spilled blood from Arkansas to Santa Fe. That guilt's all yours now." A moment passed. Then, "She ain't the girl you remember. She's fire and iron now. You brought your own punishment." Harper cocked the rifle. "You coming out?" More laughter. "I already have." The voice came from behind. Harper spun just in time to see a figure rise from the ground behind the slag pile. Tall, broad, face hidden by a kerchief, silver glinting at his mouth. "Reyes." Lila reacted first. She drew her pistol, but Reyes fired first. The shot grazed her shoulder, spinning her to the ground. Harper roared, charging. Reyes fired again, catching Harper's thigh, but Harper didn't stop. He tackled the outlaw into the dirt, both men rolling, fist striking bone. Reyes was stronger, but Harper had fury. Years of it. He smashed his head against Reyes's brow and forced the revolver from his hand. Reyes spat blood and laughed. Still slow, Marshal. I'm not a marshal. Harper drove his fist into Reyes's throat, then raised the pistol and pressed it to his heart. But I remember justice. He fired once. The shot echoed off the cliffs, final and dry. Harper staggered back, bleeding from his leg, breathing hard. Lila stood slowly, holding her arm. They stared down at the body together. He tried to bait you, she said. I know, but you baited him. He gave her a grim smile. Wasn't hard. Lila looked around the smoldering ruins of the town. It's over. Harper looked at the growing night, the stars beginning to blink into life. No, he said, but it's begun. Smoke rose in slow tendrils from the scorched mine, curling up toward a copper sky. Sundown bled across the ridgeline, gold and red streaks smeared like war paint on the heavens. Harper sat on a rock near the town's edge, wrapping a torn strip of cloth around his leg. The bullet had passed clean through, but the pain burned sharp, like memory. Lila stood across from him, watching the trail that wound back into the desert. Her wounded arm was bandaged tight, but her eyes remained focused, calculating. She hadn't spoken much since Reyes fell. Neither had Harper. They'd buried the outlaw in a shallow grave behind the stable. No marker, just stone. He'd earned no name in the earth. We could go now, Lila said finally. No one would stop us. Nobody even knows. Harper looked up at her. But someone always comes asking. A deputy. A Pinkerton. A friend. You care what they say. I care what the story becomes. Lila turned toward him. Then tell it straight. Harper nodded once, slow. He was a gang leader. Ruthless. Took lives, stole from the poor, traded in flesh. He ran until the horizon caught him. And the girl. She followed him into the dark. But she didn't stay there. Lila looked down at her hands. When he took me, she said, voice low, I thought I'd die there. Thought that was all the world was, chains and beatings and silence. Harper didn't speak. Just let the wind fill the space between them. But you taught me something, she went on. Vengeance ain't the end. It's just the last door. After that comes living. That's harder. Harder's where truth is, Harper said. Footsteps echoed across the dry dirt. Both turned. A rider approached, dusty and lean, with a badge glinting on his chest. His horse slowed near the old saloon, and he dismounted with practiced ease. Younger than Harper, but not green. The sort who'd seen enough of the world to believe the worst of it. Marshal James Harlan, he said, tipping his hat. Heard there was trouble here in Devil's Acre. Fire. Gunshots. Found 3 bodies on the North Trail, Reyes's men. Harper said nothing. Harlan's eyes narrowed slightly. You two involved? We were, Harper said evenly. The marshal surveyed the burnt mine, the town hollowed out like a carcass. You do it by the book. There ain't no book for men like Reyes, Lila said. Harlan turned to her, curiosity flaring. You the one they say he stole? I was, she replied. Now I'm something else. The marshal studied her a beat longer, then looked back at Harper. Name. Used to be Marshal Harper Gage. Long time ago. Recognition flickered across Harlan's face. Heard stories. You vanished after Fort Brazos. Said you turned ghost. Didn't vanish, Harper said. Just stopped being someone worth finding. Well, Harlan said, glancing at the grave behind the stable. Looks like you still remember how to find the worst of them. I didn't come to be a hero, Harper said, just to make sure a girl wasn't forgotten. The silence thickened, weighed down by truth too old to undo. Harlan finally sighed. A lot of paperwork if I write this the official way. You could say you found him dead, Lila offered. Burned up in a mine. Bad luck and greed caught up with him. Harlan looked at her again, longer this time. That what you want? No, she said. I want it known that a man came for justice, not glory, and that a girl nobody cared about stood her ground. Harlan gave a slow nod. Reyes had a price on his head. Enough to buy a new life. That's what the ledger says. We didn't come for the money, Harper said. I know, Harlan replied. That's why you should take it. The marshal turned to leave, paused, then looked back over his shoulder. You going somewhere? South, Harper said. Border towns. Maybe the coast. Good. Harlan mounted his horse. Some places need stories like yours. He rode off into the dusk, disappearing down the trail, without looking back. Lila watched him go. Do we take the reward? We earned it, Harper said. And after? He looked out across the horizon, where the sun touched canyon walls, and fire lit the sky one last time. We ride until the story's too old to chase. She smiled faintly. I'd follow that. They gathered their gear in silence. The saddle creaked beneath Harper's weight, legs stiff but holding. Lila mounted smooth and easy, reins in one hand, shotgun slung across her back like a promise. As they rode out of Devil's Acre, the town shrank behind them, a graveyard of sins and smoke. The wind blew cold against their backs, but ahead, the land opened wide and endless. Two shadows stretched long in the dying light, one of a girl who'd been caged, the other of a man who once wore a badge. Together, they rode on into legend,